Good morning on this Sunday, March 24th. Here's a look at our top stories on the Georgia gang. Gwinnett County puts the brakes on expanding MARTA. Those so-called heartbeat bill moves one step closer to law in Georgia. And out of the gate, will Joe Biden announce his choice for running mate would be Georgia's own Stacey Abrams? Theron, Phil, and Alexis are all here and ready to debate and discuss right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
This week, Gwinnett County voters said no to transit and MARTA, but supporters say this is just a temporary victory for the opponents.
If we really want to be part of the next generation and be that beacon for the South, we have to have transit.
But for now, Gwinnett voters said no to an expansion of transit that would have allowed MARTA to take over the county's bus system, provide 50 miles of bus rapid transit, and extend heavy rail from Doraville to Norcross. Although Gwinnett commissioners negotiated a much more favorable contract compared to other jurisdictions, opponents still said it was a bad deal.
The money they're trying to raise could be used in a much better way than 4 miles of rail and extending our bus services. We feel that we could do a better job on our own.
The vote came closer than many expected, but the referendum failed 54 to 46. Supporters say it's not a matter of if Gwinnett will expand transit, but when.
It's going to come back around again, and we're not going to give up until we make this happen.
Now, for those of us who supported this referendum, Theron, we knew that it was an uphill battle because of the date of the referendum that this was put on for a special election.
Absolutely. I mean, and historically, you've known in any state, the opposition opposed to anything, particularly when you're asking people to pay a penny more or 1% sales tax increase, they're always fired up. But you know, it was a 17% turnout, 92,000 people voted. There were 83% of people that did not turn out, and right now we know in Gwinnett County there's 543,000 registered voters, and even in 2018 you only had a 60% turnout. And so, look, I think at the end of the day, Jim Galloway said it best in his article. He said the issue with the ballot question is not yes or no, it's a question of now, later. And I think that now was not the time where voters really felt like they needed transit expanded to Gwinnett, but later the conversation will continue.
Phil, I thought there were, I mean, maybe because I was on the supporting side, but I thought there were a lot of misconceptions out there about MARTA, talking about how it's bankrupt, how they need Gwinnett money. But I mean, since Keith Parker in 2012 took over, MARTA's finances have been really stable. They've run a budget surplus for 6 years. They have $200 million in the reserves. I mean, what do you make of this kind of stereotype now about MARTA?
Well, I think stereotype might be too harsh a word, but I do think Keith Parker is doing a great job in turning MARTA around. Yeah, Jeff Parker, both Keith was before Jeff, and they both did a pretty good job. But I think several things in why the no vote prevailed. And number one, it's not if and when transit will come to Gwinnett, it's how. There's other options, and I think the opposition used social media this very effectively, and especially State Representative Brett Harrell, who was a leading opponent, talked about, you know, the state can do these major projects too, and it's Gwinnett County's turn, and the DOT, the Department of Transportation, is going to be definitely looking at it like they're doing major projects in Fulton and DeKalb and elsewhere. And so I just don't think in the end when voters, and there was a higher turnout, it exceeded both the Democrat and Republican primaries. You wanted a high turnout, you got one, but people didn't want the tax hike because it was going to be $1 billion plus that they were worried Gwinnett Countyans would be on the hook, and also it was heavy rail. You've heard me say, regular viewers have heard me say, I'm for bus transit options. Cobb County, for example, does a great job with their link, which is affiliated with MARTA. They go to neighborhoods and they can shift the routes when there's congestion and transit problems. This was really not a factor by the yes side in Gwinnett County, and I think that you can't move a rail line, and it was going to take, what, 10, 15 years to build. I just think people didn't want to buy a pig in a poke.
Well, Alexis, what does this mean for Cobb County? Because, you know, they're looking down the road to see when they could possibly have a referendum, and now they're looking at possibly 2022.
Well, I think it means that you shouldn't have a special election if you're in favor of the referendum, because that, as Phil pointed out, the opposition really revs up and comes out. But also, and if they had taken this vote in November, this past November, they probably would have passed, because Stacey Abrams carried Gwinnett 56% of the vote.
Well, I want to switch gears. I want to talk about City Hall. We had another AJC report this week. Phil, we'll start with you. Just about Mayor Bottom's campaign staff was getting paid retroactively for work that they did in December, right after she won, before Keisha Lance Bottoms was even in office.
Well, collusion seems to be the word in the political world, and there was obviously collusion between former Mayor Kasim Reed and current Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms in Atlanta to just, again, be a jobs agency. For example, Marva Lewis, the campaign manager for Bottoms, was just willy-nilly given a very cushy job as deputy airport manager. And she's never worked at an airport in her life. That's just one example of how disgraceful this is, and I'm really glad that Atlanta City Council is pushing back finally in saying, wait a minute, we can't have this. And of course, now you've got the Federal Aviation Administration saying we're going to audit. They do very few audits, but they obviously are looking at the mismanagement and the jobs being handed out to unqualified people who are political cronies.
Theron, before I get to you, I want to just say one quote that I read that Mayor Bottoms said. Her quote was, "I don't know why they did it the way that they did, other than that's the way they've always done things." I don't know if that was the correct response, considering her predecessor's administration is under this, cloud of federal corruption.
Yeah, listen, this is a tough one for a lot of reasons, and we don't have enough time for me to really dig deep into what goes on from a human resources point of view when you're transitioning a government. But what I can tell you as someone who's actually been on both sides, I've worked for the city when a new administration was coming in, and I've been a part of a new administration going in. There was never the mayor's intent to ask the people then in charge to do anything that would break code, do anything that's not above board. What she wanted was for these individuals who had worked on her campaign hard, and they had less than 3 weeks to transition the government, because you may remember Mary Norwood didn't concede until probably a few days after the election. So you need people who can go over and help the transition, and then also you got to have people to start planning the inaugural. The problem is that it's all about how these people were put in certain positions. So I want to just for our viewers to know that these people were not getting paid from the campaign and getting paid from the city. The campaign has shut down. In any campaign, you go into the campaign, you're done raising money, and to expect the mayor to then go back out and raise more money for these workers so they can go in the city, that's just false.
But every candidate who wins faces this same problem.
Yeah, and so what she was saying, and again, the mayor can defend herself on this, and I think that she's going to have more to say, is she says, hey, I want these people to come and help the transition office. There was a whole entire transition office built out for this transition. The facts are going to come out is how were these people employed and what positions they were put in. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I think we shouldn't get in this game of saying that there was collusion when there was no facts.
No,
let me finish.
There was a list that Reed and Bottoms did. They had the names and the salaries of the people to plug in, including using airport money to plug in this unqualified person.
It was stationary.
It was on. That's exactly right. How do you explain that?
But to say collusion,
you don't want it. There was collusion.
No, there was no collusion. It was a standard process to ask the outgoing mayor. And because I've been there, have you worked in city government before? You have not. Okay,
I hope
thanks.
I never do.
So as someone who has,
but as someone who's a watchdog, we have a right to speak out.
Listen,
even you have to admit this was wrong.
Phil, stop trying to make this situation worse than what it is. The mayor did nothing wrong.
We're reporting facts.
No, the facts are she asked the current administration at the time to put some people on the payroll so they could actually come to you. Wanted them to work for free. No one works for free in this town. You don't work for free.
No, but you do it the proper
but it was
way.
all about how it was done. And so I think what's going to come out later, and as you have said it, the council has done their due diligence to try to ask for an independent investigation. And what I'm telling you as someone who's actually experienced it, that you go in and you work very hard to transition this government. But this whole, I think, irresponsibility by the AJC to say that it was improper, and there's no way that Marva ever was going to go in to be a deputy aviation person.
They used airport money to pay her.
No, I got to wrap you two up real quick.
But I want you on the record for saying that, because when the facts come out, I want you to come out and basically.
I want you to say that this was wrong procedure in the HR department.
It was not wrong, because I've been through it.
The HR department says they're being unfairly blamed.
Okay, we're getting out because we have a lot of legislative news to get to as well. And coming up, Georgia's senators hijack a major tax break for Delta by attaching the airport takeover bill, and we'll discuss the so-called heartbeat legislation straight ahead.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
I think we're beginning to think that the state Senate does not like Delta Airlines all that much. And Alexis, I want to go to you because the state Senate not only took the House's tax break for Delta's jet fuel, we call it Delta's because it's mainly Delta who will benefit, but they're proposing a tax increase on fuel, and then they attached the takeover bill.
Yes, which is pretty terrible. I mean, it seems like blackmail and misappropriation of their power and authority to say if Delta doesn't, we're going to take away the tax fuel credit if you don't go along with the takeover. And Delta has been on record as saying they're not in favor of the takeover, but they've been silent since this new bill has been attached to the takeover. So I think it's really an awful thing that they're doing. It's much like the thing that they did when they took the tax credit away when they didn't support the NRA.
So what do you think about this kind of muddying of the waters here?
I don't think the waters are muddied. I think it's a great legislative strategy that we've seen for the last 30, 40 years. At the very end of a legislative session, you attach one bill to another. Delta is a company that makes billions of dollars in profits. They have the highest ticket rates of every major city, it seems like, in America. They're going to work, Alexis, Delta, with anybody, whether it's a state authority, which I hope we get, or with the city of Atlanta, which currently controls all of the operations and contracting. And so I think what's going to happen, I'm going to look in the crystal ball here, is I think, like is often a routine thing, you're going to maybe have the House, it's going to be up to Speaker Ralston to see if this passes. That'll be very interesting, number one, to watch. Number two, if it can be forced into a House Senate conference committee, I think Delta can be shown some love. I think it could be a win-win where Delta could get its break and the proponents of a state authority get their authority. That would be the optimistic outcome.
I think that if they do take over, then it'll be locked in court for the rest of the duration of the century.
That's what we've heard.
Well, there will be court suits, but I think the FAA probably in the Trump administration, and I have sources that I think would be sympathetic.
They've just appointed a Delta person in charge of the FAA.
The president appointed him, and I think the fact that the president is well aware of the corruption and bid rigging that goes on in Atlanta, they would like a state authority.
Yeah, let me jump in here. So the bottom line is that what these senators did was totally disrespectful to the governor. What Phil is not telling you is that the governor came out immediately. I was at the Capitol and said, hey, bringing these two bills together is wrong, and he pushed back against it. So it is an attempt now to basically separate the two, because what the senators are trying to do is they're trying to give this ultimatum to the people who've got to vote on this. These are two separate issues. The full tax and this authority takeover, which I don't think is going to pass, is two separate issues. And so the governor and the speaker came out right away and said, no, this is wrong. And so what the senators are doing, they're on a very slippery slope right now, because you still have a governor and a speaker and a lieutenant governor who has a great deal of power. And so I think that the thing that's very interesting is that, do we really want to continue to call ourselves the #1 state to do business when you are basically trying to take away tax breaks from the state's largest employer in Delta? And therein lies the collusion, I believe, between these senators and their message, but they're trying to punish Delta. But Delta has done a really good job of restraining themselves. But stay tuned. I think you're going to see more and more from Delta that say, hey guys, we can't do anything like this. Because
I agree, stay tuned. I think that, let me just make one quick point.
No,
wrap it up.
I'm going to make my point.
Go ahead, and then I'll make mine.
Okay. I think it will be theft, because Atlanta owns the airport. Now, how are they going to take it from something that's not even theirs?
Well, that's not Atlanta's. It's really impacts the whole state, and I believe this.
Atlanta owns it.
I believe this. I believe that the Senator Jones and the Speaker and the Governor are going to meet. And they're going to come. I know it. And
you call it down to the Speaker's office.
Okay.
And I think there'll be a compromise.
So I want to switch gears. I need to get to the heartbeat bill, because as we are recording this, thousands of people are gathering at the Georgia Capitol right now as the Senate is expected to take this up for a vote. So listen to what Governor Kemp told Fox 5 about its possible impact on attracting new business to Georgia.
We're fighting for life at the heartbeat, but we're also, even if you disagree with us on that issue, be with us on adoption reform, be with us going after sex trafficking. We have a wide agenda that will bring a lot of people into the fold, and I don't see how that could possibly be bad for business in our state.
Phil, I want to start with you, because I think you shocked a lot of us last week when you thought that, when you said that they shouldn't really be wasting so much time on this particular bill. But I had some calls from Republican lawmakers this week who said, I'm pro-life, but I think this goes too far. So how do I do this? Like, what is my messaging on this? Because it's difficult, and a lot of them don't want to vote on this issue.
Well, I've heard the same thing. We just heard the governor on that videotape say that basically he's owning this issue and he wants it. I saw this week, and I'm sure all of you saw, where the Medical Association of Georgia spoke out, and this is a real concern too. You don't want to criminalize, for example, OBGYNs under this bill, and also we're having trouble recruiting enough OBGYNs in the state. I think I read somewhere where 50 counties don't even have one, so there's a lot of problems with this bill, and unfortunately we're taping when we don't know what's going to happen on a Friday, but I don't know what's going to happen.
There's a lot of folks who are saying, you know, Republicans are seeing which direction or what direction this state is going in, and this is kind of one last big effort to get this conservative measure through.
Yeah, and I think you see this sort of mad dash, Lori, because one, they know that the state is changing. They know that Democrats are probably going to pick up seats in 2020 and 2022. But it's also a legal pathway. You know, one of the things that I heard from Republicans is that they feel that if you have this sort of law created in Georgia, it'll help the federal push to basically what President Trump has come out and said, that he's totally against Roe v. Wade. And so what I saw at the Capitol before we did this is that thousands of people showing up, men and women, to protest this Senate vote. And the bottom line is this, and I've said it before, I just think that a woman's right to choose should be that woman's right, and that significant other's right as well. And so if this passes, man, I think we're going to have a lot of explaining to do as a state.
We'll definitely be following it and talking about it next week also. Up next, could we see a Joe Biden, Stacey Abrams Democratic ticket in the race for president? We debate the idea coming up.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Well, the news outlet Axios had a scoop this week that the Joe Biden campaign announcement could include a pledge to choose Stacey Abrams as his vice presidential running mate. Theron, could this be a dream team for Democrats?
Well, I'm going to turn to Alexis because I know that she has a great relationship with the Abrams team. But look, I mean, it's something that continues to dominate this show. We every week are talking about the plans and the decision that Stacey Abrams has got to make. But I will tell you this about Joe Biden. We like to refer to him as Uncle Joe. I think what he's doing is that he's really trying to weigh this process. I think he's taking his time to really look at this. And you haven't heard much from his camp as far as this possible ticket. And so he's an experienced politician. He's been on the national scene a long time. And so we just kind of got to wait and see the posture that they take. But I think Alexis can probably give more input of what the Abrams people are thinking.
Alexis, let's talk about that, because you have Joe Biden and then you have Stacey Abrams, who's so well respected right now from Democrats on a national level. So what do you think about this matchup?
I think it was probably a trial balloon that somebody just threw out to say, let's test this. But it doesn't make any sense. Stacey would never do this in terms of the field of Democrats who are already out there. She's already met with many of them, and she's concerned about making voter suppression a key component of everybody's campaign. And she wouldn't step on, I mean, it doesn't make any sense for her strategically or politically to do that, to step on the other people who are running for office. Suppose Kamala Harris got, you know, the second most votes, and then she's not going to be the vice president choice. It doesn't make any sense.
Phil,
and one thing I think that the thing, if you're in the Biden camp, to Alexis' point, you know, it kind of appears to be a little arrogant to just say, hey, I'm going to give you guys this ticket and go deal with it. So I think the Abrams campaign and the Biden campaign are kind of managing that sort of approach to this whole thing.
Actually, I have to agree with that point, and with your point, Alexis. I think it really is a trial balloon. And I think, to your point, like on Kamala Harris, or other candidates that do well in the primaries, you would think that the Democrats would want their strongest person to be their vice president. I mean, either party would want that, and you have to balance geography and all of these factors. So I think it's very premature. I agree, it's a trial balloon.
And I think that he's not going to run for that reason, because the pushback has been so fierce on this notion.
Phil, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Senator Isaacson is weighing in on the president's tweets about the late Senator John McCain. He just won't let up on Senator McCain. Senator Isaacson is calling those comments deplorable, and we've had a lot of reaction from our Facebook group. A lot of folks just upset with the way the president is still going after John McCain. Your thoughts on this?
Well, as we know, John McCain died died 7 months ago, and I'm going to put on my communications hat, and I would say we had such a great week for the Trump administration and the announcement that manufacturing jobs are back in this country, wages are up, you've got the middle class is finally growing again, which declined in the Obama years, so he's stepping on his message.
But do you agree
and
with
so
Senator Isaac?
I do think that it was
deplorable?
I think, I'm not going to use the word deplorable, but I think it was really a mistake in terms of just dwelling on something that he didn't need to dwell on.
Wow. But he's not. You don't disagree with his.
No, I think position? I think that politics has come to the point where you've got Barack Obama that said a lot of deplorable things.
Never.
You probably had.
Never.
Oh,
no,
listen,
he
never said anything deplorable.
He talked about Ferguson, and I could go down the list.
What do you say was Ferguson?
I will say this:
a white male nationalist who went into a church and shot at people. And even in Ferguson, when you guys came on the show and called Michael Brown a thug.
The state of politics.
What kind of
the state of politics is that you're getting a lot of bad, deplorable things on both sides. That's the sad part.
Come on,
all right, we could rehash history another time, but right now I want to get to currently, because Georgia lawmakers, the committee that Speaker Ralston appointed to look at, kind of when lawyers are legislators and the delay in the court hearings, they recommended that lawyers could no longer delay court hearings for their clients because of legitimate duties. So judges can now decide whether or not it's a legitimate excuse. Alexis, do you want to weigh in on this?
Sure, because I think Ralston is just trying to save himself here, and he's the one who put the law in place for any reason in the first place. And this is, I don't get it.
So if I can jump in here, I did, Alexis, have an opportunity to speak to the Speaker this week.
All right, I did not.
So one of the things that he did share with me is that in 2010, which you're referencing, was a bill that I think then Speaker Richardson was outgoing, but it had nothing to do with this bill about legislative leave policy. So what the Speaker informed me is that there has been no change in this law. It was,
since
I think,
1905?
Since 1905. The law has been in place. There was some language that dealt with how it could possibly be changed, but he has never, ever sponsored nor authored any law that could change to benefit him or any other lawyers in the legislature.
So a lot of our viewers think that we've gone really easy on Speaker Ralston for delaying these court hearings when you're talking about victims of child molestation and DUI. So far, it looks as though Speaker Ralston is surviving this, and he's got these committee recommendations on this.
Well, I would say a couple things, and I've talked to a lot of judges, and I assume we all have, and the judges say they have the power now to force someone to schedule it. And so that's fine what this panel's doing. I'm glad the Speaker is doing it. I think the Speaker still has to address, he said he's not going to take any more criminal cases, which I think is good and wise, but I think he's going to have to announce after the session how these are being cleared up. I think that's just the politically wise thing to do, or we'll still have a political problem.
Good point, good point. I think we have time for winners and losers up next after the break, but these guys have been feisty today, so we'll see you in a second.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Well, Phil, we will change it up a little bit. Instead of starting with Theron like we normally do, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you. I think we have a winner that really is kind of a historic day on Friday over at Plant Vogtle near Augusta. You know, they have the 2 nuclear units, first time in 30 years that we've had that coming online in this country. And they're putting on a containment cap, what they call, and that's really showing that the project is on its way finally to completion. I know we've had delays and some cost overruns, but that's a historic day. And so I think I got to make some of the winners over in that Gwinnett referendum on transit. I said Representative Brett Harrell, and also a citizen activist by the name of Joe Newton. And also I got a loser. It's kind of sad. You know, the Hobbs family had resurrected the Atlanta steeplechase over at their track near Rome. It had a great tradition. They resurrected it. They couldn't get the purse together, sadly, at the last minute. They had to cancel the steeplechase, which was going to be on April 6th. I hope they can resurrect it again.
That was tough to see. And you know, let me just counter you, because one of my winners this week is Charlotte Nash. She's the Gwinnett County chairwoman who really went out on a limb, was a true visionary on this MARTA, took a lot of heat on the MARTA referendum, but you know, like she said, that they're just going to pick another date. So Theron, your winners and losers.
So my first winner is going to be the city of Brookhaven. They brought a great robust tax relief for seniors and homeowners in the city, so big shout out to the council and Mayor Ernst there. Also a young young lady by the name of Jordan Nixon is a high school senior at Douglas High School, and you guys probably saw this. She received 39 scholarship offers, totaling $1.6 million in scholarships, and so big shout out to her. Also had a chance to attend an event called the Beloved Community, the Beloved Beneficiaries. This is an event where all these different donors in the West Side community came together to raise $5 million, and Bruno Mars performed. Steve Harvey was the host, so I want to give a big shout out to that. And then lastly, my winner is going to be DeKalb County State Court Judge Shandita Morris. You may have seen this, guys, is that for 13,000 amnesty notices to people who have cases that are FTA or failure to appear, she gave them an opportunity to come in and clean up those traffic court issues. And lastly, my winner is Johnny Isaacson for calling out Donald Trump for his deplorable comments.
Alexis.
Okay, I want to celebrate Vicki Chancellor. She's the owner of 7 McDonald's restaurants in Atlanta, and she's going to make history as the first person of color to hold the position of chair-elect of the McDonald Operators National Advertising Fund, and that's the voluntary cooperative that they use to make all the commercials you see on TV. And then finally, Dr. Huey Copeland is the 2019 recipient of the David C. Driscoll Prize at the High Museum.
Great, and I will just mention President Jimmy Carter, the oldest living American president. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We will see you next week.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.